Okay, so it started.
I'm gonna refresh. Okay, hey, I see starting soon.
Oh. Okay.
Music's playing. All right. Well, give me a 3, 2, 1 whenever you're ready.
And then should I switch to live?
Yeah, give me a 3, 2, 1, then switch to live.
Okay, so here we go. 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Hey everyone. I'm so sorry that it took us so long to get set up. Ironically, the music composers are the hardest ones to get set up with all this audio because we have to have them set up and make sure we can hear the music, make sure we can hear them, and then we have to be able to hear each other. So there we go. Anyway, we're here, we're live. This is, I think, the 4th development stream we've done. We took a bit of a break for Update 5 while we were kind of focused on that. But we're back. And Boris Ivanov from the music team is joining me.
Hello.
Hey Boris, how you doing?
What's up? Doing pretty good.
Awesome. This is actually the second music stream we've had. Scott was on a few months ago, and we made some music. I think he made like a Christmas jingle, which was quite fun. But I think today we'll answer some questions from chat and talk a bit about music, and then you're going to make a new track or keep working on a track you're making?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, so for people in chat, feel free to stick your questions in. I'll kind of scan chat and ask Boris stuff that you're asking about making music. But I guess first, just sort of kind of a general overview. How are you guys making music for the game? What's the process like?
Okay. So basically, we're still kind of we're still kind of doing it the same way that we were doing it with Scott. When you last heard from us with him. So we're kind of starting off with, I guess, just shooting back and forth some raw ideas, I guess. Right now, basically, I'll just give you an example of what I did with this current track, and I'll play a little bit from it a little bit later. But basically, I had a raw idea for the placement of the track in the story that we have, and I don't want to give it away right now because it's top secret information so far. But basically, we had an idea for it, and I kind of started working on just some raw kind of textures with guitars and with drums and with bass, and then I sent it over to Justin, aka Baseless, our other composer, and he basically put a few layers on it, and shot them back to me, and so we're kind of refining it as we go. I left it a little bit unrefined on purpose, just so I can kind of work on it here a little bit and show you guys.
Sure.
So yeah, and then later on, basically, we're going to refine all the ideas, and then start dividing it into dynamic elements, which is something we've been doing a lot more recently, because we're looking at kind of having dynamic, subtle elements at most parts in the game at this point. Not necessarily really in your face, super, obvious dynamic stuff, but at least some subtle things here and there that'll make it at least a little bit more interesting for people to watch.
Yeah, cool. To. So you mentioned that you and Faceless were like moving this track back and forth between you. Is that how most of the music is done? It's like completely collaborative and you're always sort of passing it back and forth, or are there tracks where it's mostly one person and you just sort of refine it with the others?
No, not necessarily. It's mostly it's just collaborative in that we give each other feedback. But we've been getting into these like little jams, kind of. Adding elements from each composer and kind of putting them together. And we did that on at least one of the tracks that's on the official soundtrack on the YouTube. And yeah, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit difficult in that we have to wait for everyone to be available and to be to have enough time to just kind of sit down and get into the creative space. But but it is a lot more fun because because we're working together and kind of, working on it as a group.
Yeah, and what's it like? Obviously, you guys aren't in the same room. You're not even, I don't think, that close to each other, right? What's it like kind of asynchronously working like that, just like passing stuff over and then waiting for it to come back rather than like jamming on it live?
It's actually it's kind of fun. I like it in that I like when I like having kind of the time to sort of get, I guess, the new song out of my head a little bit, and to get like sort of a fresh perspective on it. It's fun because, like, you know, anyone that's ever worked on, composing music knows that, like, you start working on something and then you get kind of tunnel vision, and then if you keep working for hours and hours on end, like you you get this sort of tunnel vision effect where you it becomes kind of hard to make good, I guess, critical decisions, and you always need kind of a break. You need to make your ears stop listening to the track for a little bit, and so it's kind of fun, sort of turning yourself off a little bit, and then coming back to it with somebody else's fresh perspective. So
Sure.
it kind of it keeps things interesting and keeps you on your toes a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So are you generally working on like one track at a time as well in that sense, or do you kind of like work a bit on one and then think, okay, I got to think about something else for a bit and work on another one?
You mean like collaboratively, or just need like just,
even just you, like,
well, individually, yeah. I
track,
mean, like besides just like the typical like ear fatigue just from listening to just mixes constantly, like like you get you definitely want to take a break with a track and work on another one every now and then. So that I think for this project specifically, it's been for me at least, and I can't really speak for the rest of the guys because I'm not too sure, but for me at least, it's been at the most, I think, 2 tracks at a time that I would work on. Just because just because you don't want to spread yourself out too thin and kind of think about too many things at once.
Yeah, for sure. I'm seeing a few questions in chat from people asking about software. What software is this, and do you guys like all use the same programs, or do you mix
So
up?
this is Logic. I believe I'm the only Mac guy on the team in terms of music, but it's just Logic is, unfortunately, it's an Apple only software at this point, and I've been using it for around, I guess, ever since I think it started being owned by Apple, which is somewhere around Logic 8 or 9 or something. I can't say off the top of my head, so I'm probably saying it wrong, but I don't know. I just got really comfortable with it, and it's good for specifically for stuff like this. So that's where I like to play with music for this project. Justin, I believe, uses Ableton. And Ableton is more, I use it too sometimes. It's more pattern-based, and it's a little bit more fun to sort of, to mix and match kind of different clips. And it's a little bit more musical in terms that, like, you can kind of, like, mash up your stuff together very quickly. But I'm still kind of more in a headspace to use Logic for this at this point. And Scott, I believe, uses Cubase, which I have actually not tried. So, yeah.
Right. And what's your hardware setup? Like, what's in front of you?
So, all right. I have a bunch of stuff in front of me, but as you know, Sam, a bunch of it is not working at the moment for the sake of this stream. But here, I have this little camera set up here. So this is kind of this is the synth that I use for most of the bass lines and stuff on the project. It's a Moog Sub 37, and right now it's kind of only set up as a MIDI controller. So right now all of my sounds, just because I'm not able to use my recording system, which is a separate sound card, because streaming software, just for those that are curious, or streaming software does not like when people use external audio interfaces, and it becomes a big headache. So that's something we'll figure out in the future. But
yeah.
So at the moment, I'm just using this guy as a MIDI controller, and it's controlling the internal sounds in my software at the moment. So I can kind of play those sounds for you, but you unfortunately won't be able to hear anything that comes out of this. But most of the tracks that you hear on our YouTube channel that come from me have got this guy in it in some way, shape, or form. And also in my studio, I have a few more keyboards that I use. I'm doing this for my house right now, just because I have kind of superior internet for streaming purposes at the apartment. So, but at my studio, I have some guitars and I have some rudimentary sort of recording equipment to sort of do some live recording of. I guess we haven't recorded any like drums yet for this project live, but maybe at some point, not ruling it out. Maybe that'll be kind of fun at some point. But
Yeah, that'd be cool.
anyway,
A bunch of people in chat are saying Moog, and I don't know what that means. Can you explain?
Moog or Moog, I guess, is the that's the official pronunciation of the guy's last name. That's it's one of the first manufacturers of analog synthesizers. They started sometime in the '60s, and this is one of their newer boards, and it's basically for those who know it's 100% analog signal path, which means that from the time that a note or a wave or a sound wave or a signal starts gets created inside of here to the output stage, the signal path is 100% analog, so it never gets converted into ones and zeros. So that just basically that means that you get a much warmer, deeper, like a bigger sound that is. It's possible to get using software synthesizers and stuff like that, but it's a little bit easier and more natural if you use analog gear. And there's a lot of I don't want to get into the whole analog versus digital debate because there's both worlds have their benefits and their drawbacks, and really like one is not better than the other. But I like to use analog synths for bass lines, and if you have one available, it's really nice to use because it feels like more of a musical instrument than what something on a screen would feel like, I guess, just in my opinion.
Yeah, that's cool. On a note unrelated to music, a bunch of people have noticed your little Borealis logo in the far side. Can you bring that up to the camera?
Sure. I got to walk around all of this crap that I'm not using.
Oh, I'm
currently,
sorry.
But hold on.
Yeah, this is while you're getting that. Someone from the community made a 3D model of the Project Borealis logo, and they put it up on Thingiverse or the place where you share 3D printable things, and we have a bunch of them on the team now. Someone on the team 3D printed a bunch and sent them to us.
Let's have it live there for now.
That's awesome. Yes, I think there's about 5 of those printed now that a bunch of developers have. It's pretty neat.
All right. Okay.
Cool. Well, do you want to explain what you're doing with this track? And
So
and
let
again,
me
some
just
music making?
double check, make sure everything is coming through. There we go. You guys kind of hearing that? Yeah. Let me pull this back so I can have a full screen here. So okay. Now I have basically. Let me just get rid of this stuff real quick and mute it, just so you can see kind of where this started. So here's where this started. I kind of just started screwing around with some guitar. So I guess the initial idea for this is just to make kind of more of an action-y kind of Half-Life 2 sounding track that basically just something for. I don't want to give away the exact idea that I have for where it's going because I'm not 100% sure of where it's going, and I also don't want to, basically I want to. You guys will see it eventually when we're ready to share. But so I started with some guitar with a wah pedal, and I kind of just set a metronome to kind of the tempo of where I wanted it to be, where I thought would have kind of there would be good energy for it, and I came up with something like this. And keep in mind, this isn't quantized or edited, so I'm not the best guitar player in the world. But I basically use it for textures like this. And that's about it. And so this I'll probably end up editing this a little bit later on. And just if you want to see my the effects chain that I'm using here is I'm using just basically one of the Logic amps here, It's basically just an amp simulation, and this looks like an older kind of Marshall half stack, and I haven't really finalized the settings yet. I'm just kind of playing around with it so far. And this is running into a bus channel here, so that I can have two guitar channels running into the same effects. And I have a little bit of a tremolo, and let me just show you what that does. Let me turn this guy off first. Now, you guys are going to hear my horrible raw guitar playing. I'm a keyboard player by trade, but I play a little bit of guitar, so... now I could go and I could kind of edit all these notes to sort of be a little bit more on the beat, which here's my bad note. So I'm cheating a little bit here. I'm adding a tremolo, which basically is set to 16th notes, and it's basically turning the signal up and down really fast every 16th note, which kind of makes it a little bit more rhythmic. So yeah, it's definitely a cheat tactic at this point to sort of mask my playing,
Yeah.
But but eventually, I'll probably go back and get like a nicer take because I kind of wanted to do this quick and dirty for the moment. So I have that, and then I have this running into a really fun little plugin after the tremolo called Isotope Trash, which basically it's a distortion plugin, but it's a lot more. It basically gives you well, let me show you a few presets here. So I have it here right now. It makes it a lot grittier. I'm just going to run through presets right now because I don't really, I don't really feel like tweaking it at the moment. But you get a lot of different fun, gritty sounds with this. They're very abrasive, so it's not for everything. But if you want some nice dirt and some nice grime, I've just gotten a lot of mileage out of it. And when you actually start tweaking it, you've got filters here to play around with. Like for example, I don't want to get too techy here, but this is basically a low pass filter, which means that it filters out every frequency except for the ones that are kind of, because here you see like the frequencies going along the bottom from around, I guess, 25 or something hertz to, or 20 hertz, I guess, to 20,000, which is like the range of sound that your ear is able to pick up. So basically we're filtering out everything except for these two notches here. Kind of.
I'm just seeing some people in the chat saying that the audio isn't coming through on the stream super clear. I don't know if it's coming direct. So we had some audio issues before the stream where we were trying to get everything set up correctly. Is this audio coming direct from the PC, or is it?
It should be. Give me 1 second. Let me just double check again.
Some people are saying it sounds a bit low quality, as if it's being picked up by a mic or something.
Here we go again. How about now? This should be better. Yeah, so this is coming directly through the stream, and I apologize if it sounds a little bit less than it should at this point, because right now we're running through my internal sound card, because we weren't able to use my my audio interface. So, should I keep going?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Just say. Yeah, sorry. It was just a case of us trying to make sure that we could get all the stream stuff set up and have me on here, and yeah, it ended up being suboptimal.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of my guitar signal path here, and then so we had yeah, and then I basically I threw a compressor on top of that, on top of the distortion a little bit to sort of kind of get everything a little bit tighter, a little bit more into its own dynamic space. So next we kind of did some drums here, and drums I'm using are interesting in that. Here, let me move this guy. So okay. So let me just turn everything off, and I'll kind of show you what they are. So these, this is a plugin called Battery, and Battery it's a drum plugin by Native Instruments. Basically, they have some interesting drum kits, and mostly I don't really use a lot of the built-in effects and the built-in stuff on it because I kind of like kind of shaping the sound myself. So right now I have a very simple kit on here. Which is basically, it's called the session kit, which is kind of the default acoustic kit on there. And I kind of added a bunch of processing to it to sort of make it sound a little bit more interesting. So we have, I guess, let me pull up the camera feed a little bit. Oops. That's my mouse. Here we go. All right. So, basically, this is kind of how I like. Since I'm a keyboard player, I enjoy playing kind of drums. I enjoy kind of performing the drums into the track a little bit more than I enjoy drawing them in, because it just feels a little bit nicer. And I've been playing with drummers for a while, so I kind of get sort of what is playable and what really isn't. So we have basically just 5 keys that I use for kick, snare, and then the hi-hats here for close, kind of somewhere in the middle, and then open. And then every now and then we have the ride cymbal and crash. And it kind of sounds, it's not the best sounding drum kit in terms of realism to an acoustic drum kit, but I kind of like it because it comes across very punchy in a mix. If you want to add a lot of processing to it, it doesn't create like a huge wash. Like if you had a very high quality sampled drum kit, like something like East West would make with Ministry of Rock or Superior Drummer, a lot of the times I've noticed if you go through a lot of processing, you end up a lot of the natural room sound that those drums are recorded with, which sounds great, gets squashed and sort of gets very, very noisy very quick the more stuff you add to it. But this one here, let me just play a little bit of the track that I recorded for it. So, just did this little kind of drum and bass sort of thing. Started right. Yeah, just very simple, kind of like a sort of drum and bassy kind of thing with a little bit of a delayed snare on the third beat. And so here I ran it through some EQ. And just noticed I'm missing a lot of kick sounds. And eventually, once this is more finalized, I'm gonna separate the drums into separate tracks so I can mix them a little bit better. I like to kind of compose first and kind of mix second to sort of deal with all of the mix issues that kind of come up. And then, so here I'm running it through another iteration of trash here because I'm like addicted to it. immediately, you can see why you see that bass drum. And then I added a little bit of delay here. Oh yeah, now that little audio tail I'm going to deal with in a little bit. I'll show you why that's there. So I added a little bit of delay here to sort of, I've noticed that if you add a little bit of delay kind of on the dotted eighth note here, you get a little bit, it sounds a little bit like you have a drummer playing like ghost notes, I guess. It makes it a little bit more bouncy there. And then we compress everything. And then that little audio tail is coming from trash. It's as one of the many effects that are going on there is basically getting released slowly, and that gives us this little audio tail. And I'm not a huge fan of that. So the way that I'm right now, it's quick fix to sort of get it out of there. I'm using a noise gate, which basically just shuts off anything below a certain loudness threshold. I'm not sure if I have it set 100% well right now. Yep, and then it just closes it, and then we don't have to deal with that. Oh, actually, there it is again. So maybe I'll raise it a little bit. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So basically, let me sort of should I sort of try to recreate these drums a little bit to sort of show how it's done, I guess, how
sure,
at least
yeah,
with me.
And
again, just
one quick question
yeah.
I saw in the chat before you get into that. Someone was asking about the inspiration for these, like how you mentioned it being sort of like Half-Life inspired. Is that just from you hearing the original soundtrack of the original games, or is there like are there other places you take inspiration from?
Oh
with this
yeah,
kind of music?
I mean, like it's one of the reasons I like working on this project so much is because like, I was always a huge fan of the music, but I kind of like music, similar music to this. Like, one of my, like for example, like any kind of gritty industrial stuff, like Nine Inch Nails, like all of Trent Reznor's kind of all his film scoring work and his work on Nine Inch Nails is like a big inspiration to me and stuff. So, I kind of before I started working on Project Borealis, I was already making like I was making tracks that are not as Half-Life yet, of course, as this stuff is, but was sort of in a similar vein. So I've actually I like to sort of listen to, of course, the Half-Life stuff when I'm trying to sort of get into the mode for writing for this project, but it's also very helpful to listen to other stuff as well. That's sort of in a similar vein to sort of get yourself hyped up, I guess, to start working on a track.
Yeah, for sure. We get a lot of questions that are like, "Oh, this sounds too Portal. Like it needs to sound more like Half-Life, or even vice versa."
Right.
What do you make of that sort of stuff as you're?
Yeah.
Is that occurring to you as you're doing it?
No, those are very valid concerns, and that's something. Like immediately, as soon as we started working on this project, that was one of the top things on our list to sort of worry about is where do you draw the line between Portal and Half-Life, and I'm not sure I have a very good answer to that at this point, because they were written by two different composers, Kelly Bailey for Half-Life, and then Mike Moraski did the Portal soundtrack, the other thing, obviously, is that we're dealing with the story. If you've read the Mark Laidlaw's epistle, that it takes place, at least part of the game takes place in on the Borealis, right? On something that was made by Aperture Science. So there definitely has to be a Portal flare somewhere in there, somewhere. But we have noticed, especially with feedback from the community, that we don't want to take it too far, I guess, because we're still making a Half-Life game. Like that's still the intention,
Yeah, for sure.
I'll just shamelessly say that as a musician, like working on something that sounds close to the sort of Portal world is insanely fun because you can kind of play with all of these fun little patterns and sort of like and so you kind of have to check yourself sometimes when you're working on this, like does this, when you're working on a certain track, like does this have, is this raw enough? Is this too techy? Is this too, I guess, is this too busy sounding to be kind of in the Half-Life world? So basically, we're getting there, and we're getting to sort of a place that's a happy medium. And the feedback from people that we've heard helps a lot to sort of helps a lot with our decision making process and figuring this out. So
Cool.
Does that sort of answer the question?
Yeah. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Just I guess a quick last one before we get back into the music. Scott has a question, and so I don't know if it's a joke.
Hi, Scott. I'm not looking at the comments right now, so.
But he says, how do you plan to automate an analog patch on the Moog in the context of dynamic music in-game?
All right, Scott. Relax. All right, well, that's actually... I hope he's asking a rhetorical question, because we have talked about this a little bit. But, not in great depth. But basically, for people that are curious about what he's talking about, as I said, this guy is 100%, the signal path is 100% analog. So if you want to change how it makes a sound internally, you basically have to have it plugged in. Because every, any change that's done to the sound has to be done, any change, basically all of the sounds that you make with this are going to be printed, which means that they're going to be recorded via audio into the software, and then that's basically how it's going to be, and any change after that is going to have to be done with external effects or added-on effects after that. So there were a few ideas that we had. Basically what he's asking is, for example, if I wanted to have, and I wish I had this thing plugged in so I could kind of demonstrate it, but if you wanted to have a filter suite, for example, and the filter is the fun thing. Just in layman's terms, it's the fun thing on the synth that makes it go wow, and that's this knob right there. So if I wanted to have maybe like a note, it's playing the drums right now. But, if I wanted to have like a note playing, and I wanted to have the filter kind of slowly opening over time, and I wanted for that to be something that happens dynamically in the game, like depending on where the player is positioned. The easiest solution to that is to basically just have to record a sound on the synth. Oh, here's the drums again. Sorry. To record the sound on the synth and kind of have the filter be an external filter, like something that is within, it's something that exists in the engine, and have it be an external effect. Now, there's another possible way that we haven't really messed around with too much. If we have several different tracks playing simultaneously, and if I record a track with the filter completely closed, then maybe if it's a little bit open, and then another track with it maybe like half the way open, and then maybe a third of the way, or three quarters of the way open, and then fully open, and then maybe find some way of blending those tracks into one another, that might kind of work, or it might make a really weird sort of effect. It might totally not work at all, and but some sort of combination of that with maybe because we will have a low pass filter available to us in the engine to play around with. So some sort of combination of multiple tracks and internal game effects, I guess, might achieve this. Or another maybe an easier way to go about it would be to just have to record several filter suites, and maybe one at different tempos maybe, and have the game trigger the one that more closely matches what is going on. So basically, there's several workarounds for that. But that's the long answer. The short answer is we'll figure it out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'll stop interrupting you. Feel free to go ahead with the drums.
Oh, yeah. All right. So, anyway. Let me see here. Where were we? This guy here. Yeah. So the bass track here that I have is unfortunately not from the movie at the moment. Nothing that you hear is coming from that. The plan originally was to kind of demonstrate the way that I sort of the way that I kind of write the mood parts, but unfortunately that's not going to happen at this moment in time. So here, let me demonstrate my also not very good drum playing on the keyboard. Here. Sort of. Actually, you know what? Let's move this stuff over. So basically this is kind of how the drums came about. So, by the way, I made a second guitar track here that sort of does, it does the same thing that the first track does, but it's up an octave and a fifth. Also kind of a half step sort of motion with the wah kind of, the wah pedal sweeping. And it kind of sounds pretty cool actually when you put it together, because both of these tracks are piped into this, are piped into the same buzz channel that has that tremolo effect and the isotope trash and compressor. They're going to sound pretty cool together. So basically, you take the drums here and you get rid of a few of the effects just so it's a little bit easier to play live. So, whoops. Oh, it's because I have the solo. There we go. So anyway, so I have my my kick drum, my snare drum, my hi-hats here. So let me sort of, basically this is the way that I do it is I'll kind of set it to a loop and I'll sort of jam on it. Now Logic has this interesting feature that I really like called capture recording, and it's very helpful for me because if I'm going to record something, I guess that like the most obvious way to do it is press play and then press record. But here's what happens: everything turns red, and basically it goes into recording mode, and that's that's very scary for people that are self-conscious about what they're about to do. So yeah, and a lot of times, when you're like 3, 2, 1 record, it's not, you kind of feel pressured to sort of put on to get a good take, I guess. Now Logic does this really fun thing where you can kind of press play, and you can just kind of play stuff. Whatever. And then you can kind of press, you press a little button here, which I have mapped to Shift R on my keyboard, and it actually brings it in right there. Everything that you were playing was actually being recorded the whole time, and here it is. So this only works, by the way, for MIDI, which is, it's not going to work for audio because then they would have to have, they would basically have to be buffering and recording audio the entire time. So here's kind of, let me actually do an attempt here. I apologize in advance, but something like that. So let me This isn't exactly what I did last time. Let me see if any of this is salvageable, because that was pretty terrible. But here, let me just get rid of all of this initial stuff that I did. And press the magic button that aligns everything to 16th notes.
And so it just aligns everything to be...
Yeah, it's called quantization, and basically it aligns everything to a grid perfectly as if I played it exactly on 16th notes. Now, you don't have to do it at 100%. You can kind of do it a little bit here. Now, this was a pretty terrible take, so maybe I'll have better luck a little bit later on, but I would rather have everything aligned to 100%. To see if, because sometimes what happens when you quantize is if you really play a note out of time, it'll quantize to somewhere other than where it belongs, and it's always good to quantize everything to 100 first to sort of line everything out to where it's supposed to go, and then you can kind of relax it a little bit to sort of make it sound a little bit more natural. You know what? Let me do that again because I think. Let's try this one more time. Pretend no one's watching here. That was a better one. All right, now let's capture that. That's a little bit closer to what I did initially. So let me just let me cut out this stuff in the beginning that I did and kind of just keep. We got that annoying little audio tail there, but let's throw on that noise gate. And let's quantize this and see what it sounds like. Now, here's one of the drawbacks of using kind of not very high quality drum samples. As you can hear, well, let me just explain. There's an attribute of each note called velocity, and velocity basically means, it doesn't mean how fast you play a note, it means how hard you press a key. And in the normal MIDI standard, it could be anywhere from 0, which is nothing, to 127. And 127 is the hardest possible amount that, that's the hardest that it will register, basically. And I think you can see, if you can see where my mouse is up here, it'll actually show. See, 124, 83, 87. Now, because this is nerve-wracking, I was kind of really smashing the keys really hard. So here's something you can do. What happens is you get, if everything's at the same velocity, it's going to use the same sample. So it's going to sound like it's bashing you over the head. Now, what you can do is you can actually select everything, and it'll actually turn everything down relative to kind of where it is. And I have my secondary tool here, which is, by the way, sorry for these, I don't know why this is coming up pink. All sorts of things are happening today that are magical and annoying. Now, so, the primary tool is mouse, and the pointer on the secondary tool is going to be, when I hold down the command button, it's going to be velocity, and I'll just drag everything down a little bit. And it's still kind of all the same. Let's see what happens. So, with that in mind, now I remember how to play this part. I'm actually going to do it again, real quick. and do it better. And kind of relax, sort of, the ideal thing that I want to do is kind of maybe like, yeah, it's also the other thing is when I do it in my studio, I do this on a MIDI controller that's actually an 88 key weighted keyboard, which has heavier keys and it feels a lot more like a piano. So you actually have to press the keys a lot harder to sort of get the same velocity as you would on these things. These are synth keys and they're spring loaded. They're still touch sensitive, but they're a lot more sensitive to your touch. So what I'm trying to do is kind of like it's the same way a drummer would play it. It's sort of like a stronger with each second note being a little bit less strong than the first one. Let me see if I can get a better result the second time, and if I don't, then we'll just keep it as it is. Add a little fill there at the end. It's close. I'll probably do it better on a weighted keyboard later on, but for demonstration sake, let's keep it this way.
Is there any way you can just kind of go back in and, like, I don't know, randomize the velocities, or
yes, but I don't want to randomize anything because it's not what I'm going for isn't really random. It's just it's pop 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 pop. That's kind of where I want it to be. There's a way I can go in and actually edit each individual note, just kind of go in with a scalpel and sort of, Yes, Scott, I can use medical terms too. Yeah, but I really don't feel like doing that right now because it's really boring. So that's probably, if I was doing a finalized version of this, I would probably do something like that. Kind of go in and really fix all the notes. And also, a lot of this is, we're working, this is industrial video game music. A lot of it is going to be looped anyway. I'm not going to play the entire song, it's probably not going to be, the loops are probably going to be as long as this is. So it's about, 8 bars? Yeah. So, anyway, so now that it's quantized, let me listen to it real quick. Oops. Let's go in and throw a couple cymbal crashes on it too. Something. Now, drummers are probably going to roll their eyes because you can't play 3 drums at the same time with only 2 hands. But again, at this point, it doesn't really matter. Ideally, I do like to kind of go in and sort of make sure that it's just like personal preference. I like to make sure that the beat would technically be playable. I don't really like because it just feels more natural, it feels more musical that way. If it sounds like a it could be played by a drummer. Anyway, let me show off some of these things here. So here's how it sounds pretty much raw, just with the EQ. And here's why I like using delay. Add these little, it sounds kind of like a little bit almost like ghost notes. Now these sound very, very at this point. The velocity on all of these notes is way too high, and I don't really like it. That's a little bit better, actually. Well, you get the idea, basically.
Yeah.
And then we'll throw the compressor and the noise gate on top of it. And then, basically, just I don't want to keep going with this because you know I don't. If I go into perfectionist mode, we'll be here for forever. But basically, the next steps with this from here would be, let me go back actually to what I recorded in the studio before. I think those were, whoops, I dragged them all the way over. So let's say goodbye to this guy, unfortunately, and bring back the good take. And here's where I don't remember where it went, but I think this is where it went. Oh, I have bass in here too, by the way. And the bass is kind of doing now because I can't currently listen through my good headphones. I can't really hear myself much of what the bass is doing. Oh, we are a measure off. Should have definitely remembered where this goes. So I don't really want to work on bass right now because I don't want to work on something I can't really hear too well. So it's kind of basically I used the, this is basically the Logic stock equivalent of the analog synth. This is, they basically are, they did actually a pretty good job here of sort of emulating the way that like a move would sound and would behave, and a lot of the controls are similar. You know, I still like the real thing a little better, but it's actually pretty nice, and you know, you have actually different styles of. It's called retro synth, by the way, and it's a built-in thing with Logic. Oh, whoops. Yeah, you have different sort of styles. You have like FM synthesizers and all those kinds of fun stuff. But I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want to really be messing around with something I can't hear too well. Out of my laptop speakers. So yeah, so here's my initial drum take that I did, and as you can see, by the way, the colors of the notes here, that is what velocity it is, and that's another thing I really like about Logic. I like the way that this is sort of laid out because once you kind of know what the color code is, like the reds are the harder notes, and then the yellows and the greens are the lighter ones, and the blues are the really light ones. Generally, they're usually accident notes that you kind of just brushed. So this is my initial. Whoops, there we go. Where did it go? Here it is. Yeah. So it's a lot. Ooh, my volume's peaking, but I'll figure that out. It's I feel a lot more comfortable recording drums on a weighted keyboard, just because you know, I did study as a piano player, and you know, the initial, especially when you're playing like heavy stuff, I guess the initial instinct is just to smack the key as hard as you can. So let me just play what I have here for you, by the way, and there's another thing that I want to do after this. that kind of loops for a while. Whoops. Oh, sorry.
Hmm.
Yeah, that kind of loops for a while, and then I have the slower section here. So this is actually a better example of where delay kind of helps a lot. So if I play this without delay, solo the drum track. It's basically all eighth notes. There's 2/16 notes here, just that pop-up sort of snare hit thing. Now, if you add a little bit of delay, you get some fun stuff. You get those little 16th, the little 16th note patterns, and it sounds almost like like ghost notes on drums, which is basically like when you kind of you hit a note and then you sort of let your hand bounce back, sort of like pop, and then bounces back and kind of hits the drum a second time. And those are highly technical terms.
I'm sure
there's a much better way of explaining that. But now what I would eventually do with this is I would take the kick drum probably out of this track completely and put it on a separate track that doesn't have the delay, because when the kick drum has that little 16th note effect, it makes it a little bit less than believable sounding. But for now, just to make it simple, I'll keep everything in one place. Now, all right, real quick, let me bring in some other stuff. Now, I sent this to Justin. So far, this is all me, but I sent this to Justin, and he came up with some interesting ideas here. By the way, before I forget, there's an interesting thing that happened. An interesting thing that happened while I was recording the guitar, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit. So sometimes the guitar cables that you use aren't shielded very well, and with the proper combination of, I guess, the way you're sitting, you end up sort of picking up signals from like AM radio. So I was trying to record, and this is kind of what happened. Isn't that cool? So
That's so weird.
it sounds really trippy. Maybe a little bit more in the realm of sound design if we're talking about what we're doing for a video game. But maybe there's somewhere it can live. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of fun. So it also reminded me that I have to go buy new cables. But anyway, so back to this. So I have here. Throw these here. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't do my homework and line these up beforehand, but let's just hear what this sounds like. Oops. So. Pretty sure this is the way it sounds. Still pretty cool though. Yeah, that's kind of fun. Now, let me try some other stuff here also. interesting. And then let me try something real quick. If you'll indulge me. Let me try. No, I don't want to do any technical stuff like EQ or compress at this point because I am listening out of my laptop speakers, and basically I don't really want to mess around with anything like that at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now this looks terrible, but I think let me just use my memory and remember what a tremolo is. I think this is it. Yeah. All right, cool. I win. Let's see if we can do some. Screw this up a little bit. Now, right now, you see, I really like this tremolo plugin. It's also a stock Logic thing. Right now, we have the left signal here and the right signal here, and right now they're they're out of phase with each other. So while the right signal is getting louder, the left signal is getting softer. So if you want something more pronounced, we put it at 0 degree phase, so both signals are doing the same thing. So maybe not that. This might totally not work, and we're totally just messing around with it.
There's some weird noises.
Let's loop this here. And something I would probably also do with this, and this is also something I can't really do right now because I'm kind of listening basically in mono, is I would automate the pan, which is the pan is panning is just it's the setting that tells you which side you're listening out of, left or right. I would probably automate the pan to sort of sweep a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left, little by little. And that actually might be, depending on where this goes in the game, and depending on or if it makes it in the game or what the context is, it might be something that would be cool to automate spatially, kind of an engine if you want. But then it would kind of have to be. It would be a little bit. I'm kind of correcting myself as I talk. It would be a little bit more of a something that would seem like it has a sound source in the game, and at this point in music, we kind of want to stay away from that a little bit because that's stepping on sound design's toes a little bit. So that might not be a good idea in retrospect. I was just kind of thinking out loud, but or it might work. I don't know. But basically, let's try after the tremolo. Try to add some. Oops. Jeez, I cannot see anything yet. Let's add some of that isotope delay to this. And kind of see. What that does to it. Add the trash knob here too. That gives it a little bit more of a spatial sort of sound. Yeah. So now, just to sort of demonstrate, let's see. Let me bring in the second. Oops. tiny all of a sudden. There it is. All right. Also have some stuff here. It's pretty fun. It's definitely a little bit more dubsteppy, but it's kind of fun. Let's screw around with that a little bit. Now, let me see if I can figure out where it lines up. Justin, if you're hearing this, I apologize if this is not lined up properly. That's pretty cool. So let me just see if I can mess that up even more. Throw some of that trash too on there real quick. Oh, here's another cool thing here is this very important tool is this mix crossfader here, which is fully wet, meaning it's using 100% of the affected signal, and fully dry, which means it's using none of it. So. So basically, the next steps here would be kind of to actually sit down and really sort of focus, not on a live stream in front of a whole bunch of people, and just sort of go and maybe cut up a few of these and sort of place them in different places and really think about what I want, what we want to happen here. And now, just basically, like as a general rule, every time I write a track for basically anything. I always like to start at least in like very standard ABA form, which means basically an A section, then a contrasting B section, then an A section again, which is basically for more of the if you're a theory or a musicology or an analysis nerd, then you know that pretty much most music is like that. Even more complex, larger forms are in some way can be boiled down to ABA. But I like to do ABA just because it kind of has an arc and it sort of tells a story in some way, shape, or form. So basically, that's if you're asking about my process, at least my personal process, I always, first I'll have like I'll have an idea for an A section, but I always, when the track is young, I always make the B section immediately kind of after I come up with the idea for an A section to sort of give myself a rough outline of what it's going to be. Now, I don't know if this B section is going to be what we're going to use. I don't know if maybe we'll change our minds or anything like that, or if it's even going to go back to the A section, maybe it'll change, but it gives me a kind of good overall sort of scope of where I want things to go. Or where it could go, I guess, initially. Yeah. And then we can kind of add stuff on, and then basically I like to do it this way where I kind of throw in basically everything in the kitchen sink. Like I'll have I don't know if Justin intended for all of these 3 tracks that he gave me to play at the same time, but I like to kind of throw in everything and then go in with the eraser and just kind of really pick away at it until what's left is kind of hopefully an interesting piece of music.
Yeah, funnily enough, Justin is in chat. He says you should move one of them back a quarter note.
Which one?
I think it was that last one that you added.
The wobble?
I think so.
All right. Hold on. That makes a little sense, yeah. it's actually, I think it's still a little bit off, like just a tiny hair, but
Mm.
it's kind of fun when it's a little bit off the beat, you know.
Yeah.
That's back to that whole idea of not quantizing everything to 100%. You know, like well,
Mhm.
here I actually have these drums quantized to 100%, but I hadn't gone back in yet. See, kind of loosen them up a little bit to maybe 75. It's very, very subtle, but it sounds a little bit more like it's being played by a human being. And
Yeah.
yeah, so you always want to have that kind of that little area of, I guess, you know, the the sort of just it's just jazz mistake, you know, the wrong note here and there, you know, just the
Yeah.
offbeat here and there, you know, just to sort of, make it a little bit more organic and natural feeling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're working with like those drum beats, is there any concern that like people recognize the sample because it's like some sort of widely used set,
Okay.
or is that not?
So the answer is yes. So if I'm working with this particular um, sort of drum or sorry, the drum kit and the signal chain that I made this from scratch, so it doesn't really sound like anything else. Now, yeah, a lot of the times we use sort of samples that are very recognizable. Like there's a plugin I really like called it's called Omnisphere, and a lot of people use it, and it's basically a combination of a digital synth and a sampler. So it'll make really outlandish, weird sounds. Now, I can't really, fortunately, I can't really pop it open right now because it'll kind of eat up my sound card, I think, because I'm not using my interface. But basically, it has a lot of very recognizable sounds, and what a good kind of rule of thumb, I guess, is just try not to use stock sounds. Maybe not like try to maybe analyze what it is you like about a certain sound, and try to sort of emulate it in some way yourself. And I think it's personally okay to use stock sounds, but but it's it's always good to sort of to be able, at least to be able to sort of emulate it. For example, like I like to. That's the other reason I like to sort of do these kind of complicated signal chains, is because you're kind of shaping the sound in a way that's original, and which leads me kind of to another point. Like uh, another fun thing to do is just to sort of think of like I like to sort of take maybe not even a drum kit and sort of maybe a kit of percussion maybe, and sort of try to make a drum kit out of that, like sort of to if you hear a particular sound, it doesn't have to be a sample of a kick drum to sort of function like a kick drum, if you know what I mean. Like you can take like if it has like what does a kick drum do? It's it's punchy, but it's deep. It's got bass, and it usually goes on the ones and somewhere around the threes. So it's kind of like or the ones and like maybe the ands of twos or something like that on this beat. But basically, you can take any sound and have it function as a kick drum, and then you can take any sound and have it function as a snare drum. And just it's important to sort of use your ear and sort of analyze it and sort of understand what makes a kick drum, what makes a snare drum a snare drum, and that can kind of open the doorway to really to some very interesting kind of creations. Now, it's not something I'm doing right now with this track, but that sort of way of looking at things does exist on some of the other Borealis tracks that we've done, and you can actually say the same for even like even something like musical harmony, right? Because we have just we have ways of. Oops. Actually, let me pull up a. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Pull up the whole piano. Electric piano sound here. There we go. You know, like just like yeah, like I was talking about like some musical harmony. You know, you have in any basically in any key you have your stable sounds, or you have your tonic, which is basically the one, the most stable sounding chord in any key, and then you have your dominant, which is the unstable sound. You know, which its function is to get back to the tonic, to go back home. Now, you know, like it doesn't necessarily have to be straight by music theory tonic and dominant if you can find out. If you basically ask yourself, why does a dominant sound like a dominant? It's because it's unstable and because it wants to go back home. And if you find a chord that fulfills that function, then you can basically substitute it in. So that's all of this is to say it basically like when you're making a track, you ask yourself like what function does a certain musical element serve? How does it work? Like why does it sound the way that it does? And can it be substituted with something else? You know, I know that we're kind of going into the clouds here in terms of sort of speculation and sort of musical talk, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Anyway, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that explains things for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've been nearly going for an hour and a half, so
okay.
that might be a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah. Sure. Are there any other kind of interesting questions, lingering questions that anyone wants?
I think we've covered most of what I've seen in the chat, at least that was related to music. So thanks for hanging out. This has been really interesting. I've learned a lot. I hope everyone watching has as well. Sorry again about the audio quality. I assume at some point in the future this track is going to be online in all its glory.
Yeah. I mean, of course, as with anything, no promises. But I currently like where it's going, and the plan right now is definitely to keep working on it. And it does have a place in the story that will be revealed probably not until the game comes out. But yeah. But we do have a plan with it at the moment. So yeah, cool. Stay tuned.
Great. Well, thanks everyone who tuned in and was in the chat. If you have some particular request for what we show next in the stream, please stick it in there and we'll take a look at that. And hopefully we can do some more development streams this year. I'm not going to promise that we'll do them every month, like I said originally, because that just might not happen. But we'll try and do more of them. So thanks for hanging out, Boris. This has been fun.
Absolutely. Same here.
Cheers.
All right.
Hey, that was great.
Did I do it? Did I turn it off?
I think so.
Okay.
We're probably gonna have one of those moments that gets shared around when we're just chatting and the stream's still on.
Yeah. Right.
It looks like it's on the end screen. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I clicked. Oh, all right. Yeah, that was interesting. Awesome.
Oh no, I lied. We are literally still on the stream. I just checked.
Oh, great.
You can mute it. I mean, it's technical issues, folks.